what a dog would eat in the eyes of the big conglomerate pet food companies. That in the eyes of them, a dog in the wild runs through the grass, hair blowing back, all healthy, a vision of health and happiness. And then when he reaches his destination, it's a plastic bag full of dry food.
I want to reiterate the message, as fired up as we all get as, people that have dove extremely deep into the waters of pet nutrition, there is always, I would say, good, better, best options out there for any category within pet food. That's a topic for a different day.
We've come today to talk about nutrition, and the subject for today was one that Erica, you brought up. What would a dog eat? We always ask the question, what should a dog eat? But it's interesting to phrase it as what would a dog eat, because this is all about what would a dog eat if we didn't exist. We've messed with their food so much through the years that the question really should be, what would a dog eat, rather than having a bunch of companies telling us what they should eat. So, I
think it's so important to phrase it that way, because we have lost touch about what they would naturally be eating, so much to the point where a exclusively dry diet that's formulated specifically for the needs of, I would say, an entire species, when that's kind of the case. And we're not looking at individual needs. We're not looking at the biology of what they would be eating if, they were on their own hunting. All of these factors seem to have been wiped off the table for some weird reason. And we are so focused on nitty gritty details that truly don't matter if we're not looking at foundations of what an obligate or scavenging carnivore's diet should look like. So it begs the question, what would they eat if we weren't here?
100%. It's always been baffling to me that we feed our dogs and cats, for that matter, these dry biscuit type things, bickies as we would call them in Australia. And it's just, but it's how is that, when you relate it to yourself, there seems to be this lack of empathy. It's just well, even if you gave me, I don't know, Oreos every day, right? For the first couple of days, I would love that, right? They're formulated for me to be addicted to them and to love the taste of them. But clearly after a certain period of time, I can't be getting the nutrients that I need. And even if they're saying that I noticed that you did quotation marks for formulated to, it's just what are they really formulated for? I mean,
well, and it's you make a good point with the dry, the kibble. We always like to talk about it in something that's more comparative, like protein bars. I always tell customers they're 100% complete and balanced, and they're formulated for us to eat, right? So we could eat those 3 or 4 times a day and technically be complete and balanced and get our nutrients in. But are we thriving or surviving? And to me, that's surviving. I may not be thriving because I'm not bringing in the quality proteins, the quality fruits and veggies that I need for my nutritional needs. And same thing for the dog. If they were out in the wild, they would not be choosing kibble over a freshly killed rabbit, for example, or a bird. So there is that vast difference, even with we always talk about moisture rich diets. And that's a big reason. I mean, their natural diet is moisture rich just because that's what these small animals contain. So it's super important for the function of the body, the organs. It's less taxing on the organs, the fresher the food that goes into their body. So, we do have fantastic, great quality, high quality kibbles, but at the same time, our biggest mission is to add that moisture rich into that diet as much as possible, as much as you can. So that's a big, big part.
Do you think that this is just another example of society getting unhealthy because they're prioritizing convenience?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. 100%.
And then
y'all are busy.
What was that, Lisa?
We're all busy. So the more convenient something can become, people will gravitate to. And marketing, and I know, Diana, you do marketing, so no, it's no knock. Luckily, you're on our side, but marketing does wonders to that, right? They put on these great images of wild dogs running through fields and fresh meat, fresh, fruits and veggies on front of the packaging. But we fail to turn the bag around and read the actual ingredients. We let the picture on the front of the bag sometimes, dictate our choice of buying our purchases. So we are always encouraging to look at the ingredient panel, because that's going to be the key to knowing what's actually in that food.
I actually love that you just mentioned the dog running through the field, because you're right. It's always that, and they try to teach us that dogs come from wolves and all of that is correct. And it's just like, okay, so why is the dog running through the field but then landing at a plastic bag full of processed food? We're like, and we're so programmed to not notice how wrong that is. It's just like, so the dog's like graduate. So this is what a dog would eat in the eyes of the big conglomerate pet food companies. That in the eyes of them, a dog in the wild runs through the grass, hair blowing back, all healthy, a vision of health and happiness. And then when he reaches his destination, it's a plastic bag full of dry food. It like where there's a disconnect. That is not where the dog ends up in the wild. Like, Erica, where would they end up?
Yeah, no, it's hilarious. We can laugh all we want about this, and I know us as we do laugh because we can't. What else can we do? But in all reality, that's sad. That's really sad, because that disconnect is huge and it is deep. And we have been, I call it brainwashed over generations to not just accept kibble or highly processed diets as the diet for your pet, but not second guess it either. Not think about, is that what my pet should be eating? Is fresh meat or a raw diet really that crazy of an idea? And that's what gets me going, in all honesty. I get very fired up about this because in no world would a pet, be it dog, cat, guinea pig, I don't care what it is, they would never be cooking their food.
Yeah.
So, point, that moisture, that natural intracellular moisture that's present in fresh food would always be there in their diet if we weren't intervening and creating a convenient food or diet for them to be, sustained on. And the other thing that I get so fired up about is the survive comment.
Yeah.
They can survive on a dry diet, or even just honestly any, I would say, like commercially formulated diet without rotating foods, right? What they could survive on that one specific recipe for their life. Yes. Thriving. And I can say that with absolute conviction, they will never be thriving in those types of situations.
Yeah. That is so sad. What is it about, but what, I mean, I know a little bit about it, but I'd love you to elaborate. Like, what is it about these kibbles that, and these, especially from the conglomerates that are oh so powerful, what is it about them that is so bad? Apart from what you've just mentioned,
Yeah, and I want to reiterate the message, as fired up as we all get, as people that have dove extremely deep into the waters of pet nutrition. There is always I would say good, better, best options out there for any category within pet food. And that's a topic for a different day. But dry diets in specific, they're highly processed, making them vastly different from the original ingredients that are put in. So like the raw materials that are put in, their processing denatures, degrades, destroys nutrients. So then oftentimes the bigger conglomerate, I would say pet food manufacturers, tend to put in synthetic versions of those lost nutrients and or lots of fillers, honestly, to make up for calories and nutrient deficits, right? So I'm talking mostly about protein, obviously, with label dogs what you will. If you call them omnivores, I'm sorry, but that's just not correct. They are facultative scavenger or opportunistic carnivores. And the word carnivore is just as important as the preface opportunistic scavenging or facultative. Carnivores need meat in their diet. They need animal-based protein in their diet. They do not need plant-based protein. So that's another kind of, I would say, marker of a good versus not so great diet for them, especially when we're talking about kibble. I could go on, but it's really about the animal meat inclusion and the quality of that animal meat, and then how it's processed. So how much moisture has been lost and how much of the original nutrients have been lost in that processing. That's the big, like, I would say, worst parts about kibble.
Yeah, that's so sad. And I think, like Lisa, I mean, you even got into the pet industry because of what kibble essentially did to your cats, correct?
Yeah, I just saw that they both passed of cancer, and I'm not saying that it was caused by it. I'm acknowledging that they did not have a fighting chance. Their immune system wasn't in the best, that it was surviving, it wasn't
Yeah.
thriving, right? Ultimately, they couldn't overcome that. And they may not have, but they would have probably been in a better position, or maybe healthier. Who knows? My point
Yeah.
is feeding them a better diet. I know I have a better fighting chance if I catch a disease or something going on in my body, if I'm feeding it and giving it the proper nutrients it needs to be able to combat that. Whether it's extending life or overcoming something, that's going to be up to my body, and what how well I choose to eat. Same thing for your dog and cat. They don't have a choice what goes in their bowl. We make that choice for them, right? So our goal is to just educate as much as possible so that whatever you can afford, you can incorporate the best into that bowl, because they don't have a choice. We're in our homes now. They're not scavengers out in the street catching their own animals. So we really need to be conscious of that. And I think the more that we are exposed to better health benefits, just acknowledging and getting educated as humans for our own good and our own bodies, it definitely has a direct connection to our pets. It's really no different. We know processed foods for ourselves, protein bars, they're convenient, but they're not the best choice, right?
Yeah.
So we know by eating a healthier, balanced diet, that's actually a better choice. So it's just making those steps however you can for your pet, to incorporate some of that in there, to just boost that bowl when you can, as often as you can.
Yeah, and I think the thrive versus survive thing is so important, because you will get a lot of people going, well, I fed my dog kill science diet for however long, and he lived to 14 years old and they're only supposed to live to 10. Oh, that's completely possible. We're not here saying that. But
Right.
like, what makes their life better? What prevents illnesses or arthritis? Or there might have been some things that your dog or your cat actually was suffering from, and maybe some of it you never even saw or knew was going on. So that's the other thing. And I think it just takes us back to our topic, which is a question: what would a dog eat? And you were just mentioning, Lisa, now they're in our control, so it's our responsibility. But at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge their instinct, and that is, we have to train dogs not to eat the next door neighbor's cat. We have to, and thank you everyone out there. Thank you for training your dogs not to do that. They have to be trained in order for them to live safely in society. But at the end of the day, we are training instinct out of them in order for them to have a happy and safe life. But that instinct was very important for them to thrive. And so it's our responsibility to make up that gap. And I mean, for me, the answer has always been obvious. What would a dog eat? But I don't think it is obvious to everyone. And I think, Erica, you were 100% right. I think the reason it was obvious for me is because I grew up in the country. It's just like it was wild animals that did get fed to our pets. But I think a lot of people who have a different upbringing are only exposed to what I would call, brainwashing.
The brainwashing comes in not just from the marketing that big conglomerate pet food manufacturing companies have put out there, but it's also the disconnect from how similar genetically wolves and domestic dogs truly are. You look at a Chihuahua, you see Muggins, she's 5 pounds soaking wet, just this little tiny blonde dog. And you look at a dog like that and you think there's no way that she's genetically identical, basically, to a wolf. There's no way. But there is. And it's the type of domestic dogs that have been bred quite drastically to look different than a wolf. But genetically speaking, biologically, their anatomy, physiology, especially in terms of digestion, is so insanely similar that it would be, I think when people really draw the similarities between the two, it's a no-brainer that they would be eating the exact same type of diet as wolves. And wolves are obligate carnivores. That's their classification.
Yeah.
So while wolves still will be a little bit scavenging and opportunistic in their eating behaviors, so they won't simply die from lack of meat, right? They will scavenge around for foliage, berries, whatever it is around them, for plant matter to sustain life. Their overwhelming majority, 99%, we could say, of their natural diet is absolutely prey-based, right? So it's whatever the pack hunts and they eat. And we can observe that throughout history with wolves. We can also observe it with undomesticated dogs, right? So
yeah.
a little bit more, like I would say, closely linked intuitively to today's domestic dog. We still see those same behaviors. So it's just funny to me that without drawing those comparisons, people are just like, no, my little Chihuahua is nothing like a wolf. Well, that's where you're wrong.
Yeah, exactly. You know what's interesting though? I mean, for the audience out there, it's important to know that even vets think like this. We have our struggles, and we're going to talk about that on future podcasts. We're going to talk about people out there fighting for vegan dogs and cats and things like that. And we're going to touch on all of those subjects throughout these podcasts. We're going to interview people. We're going to interview vets. We're going to interview specialists in their area, in their fields when it's related to pet food. But we're also going to interview people that disagree with us. And I think that is really important. But it's important for the audience to know that there is no shame attached to having never fed your dog or your cat like raw meat. There's no shame attached to that, because the world has you're doing exactly what society has essentially wanted you to do. But we're essentially asking you to strip it all away. Like, you wouldn't be wearing clothes. If you were out in the woods acting like a wild human, you wouldn't be wearing clothes. And it's hard for us though to strip society away from our instincts now, because it's become instinctive for us. So it's just hard to do.
I think we can also, something that can help our pet owners is just think of it in the most simplistic way. When we're looking at ingredients, it should be identifiable ingredients, right? It's not the fractionated corn gluten meal, or they've got 17 different ways to call wheat and soy isolate. They've got all these different ways to call different things. And instead of just looking for like chicken, whatever is in the next thing, like just hearts, liver, apples, whatever's in the ingredient panel, but just simple. If you can read it, then, like that's what you should feel comfortable with, is just keep it simple. That's like,
I love that
thing. We just say, keep it simple. It should be identifiable, easy to read ingredient panels. If it's fractionated this or whatever they have lots of ways of saying things. So that's like a one takeaway I would recommend is when you're looking at ingredients, is the simple the ingredient panel, the better.
I think that's fantastic advice, and it's actually easy for the everyday folks to identify that. If something looks like it's scientifically complex, then you don't recognize it. That's your answer. You don't recognize it as food. So it doesn't say apples. It doesn't say chicken. It's something that you've never heard of before. I mean, I've even heard of, and is it true that they even put essentially sawdust in some of these kibbles in order to fill the animal up? Is that true?
There's crazy things happening in some of those, like we call them mass conglomerate kibble manufacturers. There's crazy things. And if you take a deep dive into that world, you will find stuff that is very unsavory. So that's such a mission.
That could be a whole podcast on that.
Yeah, I know. So that podcast is called Sawdust. Sawdust or not to sawdust.
I mean, in all fairness, though, that is a huge like push of from our stores is to provide that education, and the average consumer absolutely would not know this. And there's still things today that we all on this call find out about and just go, "Oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me." Like this is happening, and it continues to happen because there are companies out there that want profit over quality,
Yeah.
and they care more about money than they do the health of pets. And it's a sad reality that they're doing this stuff largely behind closed doors, right? There, a lot of people don't know anything about this, and I certainly didn't. I had my undergraduate degree is in human nutrition, and I applied zero of that to my pets' dietary needs until I got into a position like this, where I just, like I said before, dove headfirst into pet nutrition. Boy, was I shocked and upset, to be honest with you. I was very upset that this is so, so not common knowledge. It's hidden knowledge. It's
Yeah.
stuff you quite literally dig up about companies. And we want to provide customers with that information so that you all can do what you want with that information, make informed decisions, because a lot of customers, unfortunately, think they are making informed decisions and they're not, because it is such a secret and I would say convoluted industry.
Yeah.
I think it's good that you point out, Erica, like you were in it on the human side, didn't always connect the dots until you had your aha moment. And that's where I feel like everybody has their aha moment at a different time. Mine was when my cats both unfortunately passed of cancer, and I started diving in deeper. Like that's kind of odd that they both had it within a year. It was the mother and the daughter, and happened to research the food a little bit more. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I went into a pet food store. I bought the most expensive food that was on the shelf, thinking that equated and equaled quality. And I bought it and thought I was giving them the best of the best, and realized I was giving them a bunch of corn, and they're cats and they are obligate carnivores. That was a huge disservice to them. And again, not giving them that fighting chance with their immune system. So it is, everybody has that aha moment, and it's at different times in their life. And sometimes it's unfortunate, but sometimes it's a story where you have something that happens with your pet. And, that launched, me to feed my future pets better and better and better. So,
and in some ways, it's not even about feeding them better. I mean, it is, it works out to be better, but it's the old less is more, isn't it? It's just like strip away all of that. We actually, in a perfect world, we understand people can't do this, and we will talk about convenience briefly, but in a perfect world, don't go to the shops. If there is, it would be wild animals, but no one wants to go out there. Well, most people, I certainly don't. Nobody wants to be going out there killing innocent animals, and that's the horrible part of this too. And I know that me as somebody who, huge animal liberationist, doesn't want to eat animals myself, but I still have acknowledged that my two cats are obligate carnivores. Like I have to understand that, and I have to work with that. I have to deal with it. I have to buy them meat. And, it's like you don't feed a panda eucalyptus leaves, and you don't feed a koala bamboo.
right.
Yeah.
They have their nutritional needs.
Yeah.
I should actually change what I just said. We actually have slightly changed the biology of dogs in specific, because they've proven to be so adaptable, which just is a tribute to just how amazing they are as a species, and how they've evolved. But truly, as I mentioned before, how incredibly similar genetically they are to a wolf. I'm talking 99.9% DNA similarity. That's incredible.
Yeah.
But we actually have slightly changed their biology over time. Their digestion specifically has actually altered slightly to accommodate to a kibble diet, believe it or not. We have done that. And I think that is such a massive disservice to them as a species, and says a lot about how, I guess, far we take convenience and lifestyle into our pets' lives. Yes, Diana, absolutely. If we would have an ideal world, we would not be changing what they eat, what they're biologically designed to consume. Instead, we would be finding ways that we can all cohesively eat our own species appropriate diet. But
Yeah.
in world, that's just really not possible for the large majority of people, understandably. So how can we take what we now know, right? Listeners on this
Mhm.
on this podcast, what can we now do to, I guess, improve the situation? Even taking small steps, like Lisa mentioned, will actually prove beneficial to your pet's life. Even it's replacing one meal a week with fresher, it doesn't have to be raw. It can be dehydrated food, maybe freeze dried, whatever's in your comfort level and budget. Literally, even replacing one or two meals a week has proven to be beneficial in terms of quality of life for pets. So we're talking about a species that's incredibly adaptable to whatever we do feed them. And we've all three of us have witnessed dogs eat dirty diapers, garbage, poop, right? They're quadriplegic, literal poop. We've seen them eat a whole lot of random things
Yeah.
that are not even food, right?
Yes,
It's like,
exactly.
so we know that they're incredibly adaptable, but it's like Lisa was kind of mentioning earlier, it's our responsibility as their caretakers, providing them with their meals, to really sit and think for just a moment about, what would they be eating?
You know what's interesting? You just mentioned eating things that they definitely shouldn't be eating, like the walls. But the interesting thing about that is that I do have a theory that their bodies are actually craving nutrients that they're lacking, and that's why that happens. I do wonder how common it is for people that do have varied diets and meat filled diets for their dogs. I do wonder if they have less issues with that, because I mean, even in humans, like you look at a pregnant woman, like you hear these stories of pregnant women going out with a spoon into the yard and eating dirt and chalk and really bizarre things that no one talks about publicly, but we know that these things have happened. And it's because their bodies are craving nutrients, because in reality, we would be eating some dirt. Like we're missing those minerals. And I do wonder whether dogs that were really fed like the optimal diet, whether they would be less likely to chew on the diaper.
I would say, honestly, with what I know about this whole thing, I would say it's 50-50, because there's so much behaviorism that's going on with dogs, and
True. Yeah.
On the shoes or whatever. Sometimes the stuff just smells good, and they're like, us, it smells awful, right? And we're like, why would you think that's good? Dogs are totally different than us. If raw green tripe, oh my word, that smell is otherworldly, we'll just call it. Extremely pleasant. Dogs love that stuff.
Oh my gosh.
So there's that part of it, and then there's the innate intelligence, the wisdom that Diana, you're describing, that is our biochemistry, that is the dog's, physiology, our literal communications from the gut to the brain, communicating to one another, saying, I need this food because it supplies this nutrient.
Yeah.
And we've all observed it probably when your dog goes out and eats grass because it's got an upset stomach.
Mm-hmm.
That is your dog's innate intelligence telling it to go instinctively seek out grass to soothe the stomach or make it throw up, whichever it is.
Yeah.
Wolves do that still to this day amazingly well. But because dogs have not relied on that, I guess, instinct for as long as they've been domesticated, they now rely on us way more than they would if they were on their own in the wild.
Yeah.
I think we kind of trained that out of them a little bit, or it's so much less of a need for them. So yeah, it's such a, I think, 50-50 thing, if they would do that with
and
or without us.
I think the other thing that I also probably didn't take into consideration as I was thinking about that is just the instinct to kill, though, as well. So they still have that instinct to kill. So if it's a diaper or, a piece of furniture, like even if they are getting their nutrients, I'm sure, I believe there's probably reduction in chewing of things or eating things that they shouldn't. But if there's not a complete reduction, it's probably because there's still that instinct to chew something up, to attack it, to kill it and rip it to bits. Yeah.
And exercise part too, I think.
Yeah.
And that could be another topic that we dive into, but there is a lack of exercise for our pets, right? And so sometimes that can trigger that behavioral boredom for chewing.
Yeah.
I hear it all the time where they're like, well, I went for a walk down the street and it's like, oh my God, these dogs are used to walking miles, So there's that
walking miles and miles and miles and miles, hunting something, having one really large meal, and then maybe not having food for quite some time until that next prey, right? Like that's another really big disconnect between the way that we feed pets today versus how they, naturally consuming food. So, I mean, this is a time for another podcast episode, but we can go into quite a bit of detail about the difference between a domesticated cat and a wild cat, because their eating patterns are vastly different and
100%.
super for pet parents, right? Like it's not convenient to feed 7 post midnight to 5 a.m. ping pong sized meals to your cat, but that's how they would be eating.
It is. Well, mine are determined to get me onto that routine. So I think most cat parents will tell you that you've got some pretty determined trainers going on when it comes to getting us in sync with their routine.
Cats are not the trainee.
No, they're 100%. No, it's absolutely right. Well, look, I think that I think this has been a great discussion, but it also launches into 1,000 other discussions. We want to talk with vets about why they think kibble food is okay and what is in their training, and what companies might have contributed to that training that has that leading them to believe the things that they believe. We want to interview people that have explored different diets, etc. We want to really deep dive all of the nutrition bits and pieces, but I think this was just a great discussion to have, because we have separated ourselves so vastly from the wild. So it's a discussion that needs to be had. So for those of you who are not familiar with our stores, we're just here on a mission to educate, but we do have pet supply stores. Wise Pet, we also have other, it's also a family of brands. So we've got other brands like DOG, Pet Depot, Nature's Pet, Bentley's Pet Stuff, Pet Pros. So there's a bunch of brands that live underneath us, and we're basically a coalition of pet lovers that are determined to change the way that we think about our care for our pets. So please visit one of our stores. You do not have to buy from us, but please at least let us help you buy better. Most of our stores have nutritionists and certified pet dietitians on staff to help you with the education as you move forward. Thank you so much, Erica and Lisa. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks, guys.
Good.